The first average check has gone up a lot in the last 9-10 years. What is a pre-seed round? What is a seed round? Companies raising millions of dollars right off the bat. But how do you get to your first milestones? How do you build a company? I think that a lot of that has remained true in the last decade.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, UpWest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. My guest today is a good friend, Gil Ben-Artzy, the founding partner of UpWest, the only seed fund that's purposefully designed to help Israeli startups break into the US market. Headquartered in Silicon Valley and operating since 2012, UpWest was the first investor in SentineOne, HoneyBook, and 80 other startups that raised over $2 billion in follow-on funding from top US VCs. Prior to UpWest, Gil was the vice president of operations management at Yahoo after working with the company's corporate development group. Gil also served as a consultant advising Fortune 500 companies for the Boston Consulting Group in New York. Gil Ben-Artzy, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders.
Thank you for having me.
We're in the beautiful UpWest Labs office. As you can see, the amazing view here, but it's wonderful.
Just UpWest.
Just UpWest. Wow, okay, so we're going to be talking about changes. We're going to be talking about the last 9 years. So let's start from there. 9 years ago, you and Shuli created this new idea. Israeli entrepreneurs breaking into the US market. Things have evolved. The Israeli market has changed. We went from startup nation, we're now into scale-up nation. What is it like from your end as the venture capital investor, being there 9 years, watching this Israeli ecosystem drive up?
Yeah, so first of all, it's been amazing. We were fortunate to start UpWest. Actually, it's closer to 10. I can't believe it. Close to 10 years ago. So much has changed. Back then, Israel still had, like it does today, amazing entrepreneurial spirit and power. And there was, emerging landscape of companies creating great momentum. Fast forward 9-10 years, we all see what's happening. You have unicorns all over the place, companies raising, just like in the US, raising in Israel. It's really we've seen a huge shift and uptick in companies that are creating, hopefully, marquee brands and new emerging businesses.
So right before we talk about, the shifts, but what also stayed the same, take me back almost 10 years. Take me back to the founding idea and how you and Shuli are positioning yourself along with the rest of the UpWest team. What does it mean, to be in venture capital, on the Israeli ecosystem? What was the thesis that you came in with?
Yeah. So back then we started with said, look, same things we actually believe in today, which is being in market increases your likelihood to build amazing businesses, amazing companies. So back then, it's about finding those entrepreneurs in Israel, all the ones already in the US, and helping them with the first sort of few years in their ecosystem. So, for example, we're fortunate to be in New York last week. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago, on the SentineOne IPO. That's a company that we were the first investors in 2013. And so just to use them as an example, the first year or so, they were with us in our office space in Palo Alto. We were fortunate to help them find the first investors and advisors and customers and work with them since then. And it's been just tremendous to see how they were able to IPO the largest ever cybersecurity company ever. We're excited about that. We have a whole slew of companies we believe that are coming right up as well. So it's been amazing to see that thesis I just described and what we did with SentineOne, we believe still holds true today. I mean, I know a lot has changed and is changing post-COVID, but the fundamental belief that being in the market can help you create amazing businesses, we think still holds true. Fast forward to today, we also have Asaf and Leah in Israel, so we've grown a bit, but still, we love to do what we do.
So what's happened, from your perspective over the last 9 years? We're seeing it all the time on the news, and there's a different vibe, I think, going on in the streets here, especially in the area where we're at. Well, what has happened to the Israeli ecosystem over the last 9 years from an objective perspective?
So first of all, globally, we see the numbers. What has happened in Israel is amazing. We've actually seen similar things around the world and the US as well. I'm no expert, but if you read the last few days, take Stripe, for example, they're talking about the IPO north of 100 billion or so. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. You see Snowflake, right? The valuation, Airbnb. So the watermark, I think, has really gone up. So if in Israel we used to speak about $1 billion company valuation, now it's like a Tuesday, right? Or now, thanks to a Tuesday, right? It's like, but now you have the likes of, like I said, SentineOne, but you see Iron Source, you see what Monday.com have done, and a whole slew of amazing companies coming up there. They've raised the bar, but I think the great news for Israeli startups and high tech is that, you look up, there's still ways to go, right? And you can hear it in the language of the founders that they're aspiring for more, which is tremendous to hear. So if you look at the Stripe and Airbnb and those guys, we can get there, right? We can build those marquee companies. What hasn't changed, is I think the mechanics of building a company, of choosing the right investor and starting off, is the same. The first average check has gone up a lot in the last 9-10 years. What is a pre-seed round? What is a seed round? Companies raising millions of dollars right off the bat. But how do you get to your first milestones? How do you build a company? I think that, a lot of that has remained true in the last decade.
Right. So what I'm seeing, from friends, and I'm seeing that there's a lot more confusion because obviously there's a lot more capital, and once you're a hot deal, or once you've proven that you're investable, then it's likely that not only one VC would like to invest in you, but now you have a few investors, and sometimes this can be blinding, right? And you talk a lot about choosing the right first investors and the right first partners. With SentineOne, you really worked with them over the first year in the offices, and every time I came to visit your offices, I'm seeing companies sitting there, and there's no office hours for Gil. They just literally come in the office, and you're working with them day in and day out. So what does it mean really to choose the right first investors, the right partners to go on the journey for maybe an early stage company that is just starting out, that may be getting blinded by what's happening now?
So you're right. A lot has changed in the sense that as a founder, you have many more financing options on average than you did in the past. You gave a few examples here that if you get one term sheet, you usually get more and maybe more money. The excellent news is that there's a lot of really good investors in Israel, in the US, everywhere. So for you as a founder, just do your homework, right? Spend time with the investors, do your due diligence on companies they invested in and backed. Think about what's the most important thing for you now and in the future to succeed, and pick the one that, if you're fortunate to pick, just pick the one that fits you the best. Maybe 8-10 years ago, you didn't have that luxury. Now you do. So I think that's been key. I think for us, what we've tried to do as a fund is also grow with the time. So if in the past, our check size was mostly focused on pre-seed, a few $100,000, fast forward to today, we're writing checks of a few hundred of thousands to a couple of $1 million. So we look to co-lead or lead pre-seed and seed round of, let's say, up to $4 or $5 million rounds. So for us, we've tried to grow a little bit with our check size, but still be the first check. Just like in SentineOne, just like in all of our 80 plus portfolio companies across so many domains, being that first check or almost the first check is what we aspire to do and help the companies as they begin to grow in the US market.
Is there a difference in the perspective or the mindset of the entrepreneur from that first investment until their next round? Are there different, timeline expectations, different growth trajectories that they're feeling pressured to do because they have to raise a round pretty soon, or anything of that sort?
2021 is slightly a crazy year. I don't think I'm breaking any news here, right? But right now, sitting in this office in July, it can get pretty wild. Certain domains, certain companies, you see them gain momentum a few months after the financing round, and then they get knocks on the door from the next round of investors saying, take my money now. Why wait another 6-12 months? So it can be a little bit confusing, which I think can distort things. But each case is a case-by-case basis. Under the right situation, maybe you want to spare yourself the trouble of going through the financing route. But sometimes, like I said before, you want to do your due diligence on the investors and the right time to raise the next round. It can get very confusing. People come and deal with lots of money, which is hopefully why founders I see much more today than the past talk to one another and learn from one another and see what step they've taken and what was correct and what was incorrect in hindsight. Especially in Israel, which is such a collaborative ecosystem, which is obviously fantastic to see.
And so as early stage investors, what is really the push that you give the entrepreneurs, today or before, as you're working in the 80 plus portfolio companies? What does the partnership tangibly look like?
Yeah. So the way we think about it and the way we tell our founders to think about it is it's to think about it as a partnership, and it's a long, long journey. Sometimes you open the press and you're like, wow, these companies, it seems like they move so fast and they raise so much money. SentineOne was 8.5 years. We have companies we've invested 9 years ago that are 10 years ago that are still going strong. So we want to be there for the long term, and that's what we want the founders to see us at. For us, it means in the early days, anything from finding the first set of employees to finding the next round of investors to finding the first set of customers. For us as a fund, our focus is really the US market. So it's getting those customers that can afterwards serve as amazing reference points for the future. Some of the early customers of, again, going back to SentineOne were Netflix and Box. That really helped propel them going forward because it positioned them as sort of this, US-based company with customers that could be super referenceable for the next Fortune 500 companies that come after. So for us, it's early employees, follow-up investors, customers, and frankly, a lot of things that go on in the early stage of startups that, you sometimes don't talk about, right? So how do you get the right management team on board? How do you get, all the founders on the right page? So for us, it's really about, being there for the founders in those early years and supporting them throughout the process.
And is that, something that the founder can prepare for, ahead of time, understanding, all this diligence? Is it really, you think domain specific? Is it more on a personal level, figuring out what investors you want to personally interact with? Because what you're just brought into the conversation is this idea that you're actually not looking just for somebody who's very well connected and can push you forward, but somebody that can help you resolve conflicts internally and think critically, how do you grow the right management team, right?
Exactly. And again, there's lots of really good investors out there, and you want to find the ones that can help mentor you and guide you throughout the process. You get to choose your partner in a way, right? Who sits on your board and will be there for the long term, hopefully. So yeah, it's definitely interesting times.
So where are we moving from here?
It's a great question. I think a lot of things are still being figured out, right? Everybody is talking about, so in the post-COVID world, in theory, right, post-variant world, what's going to happen? Are people going to go back to the office the way it was? I think we can probably pretty safely say no. It's not going to be exactly the same. But what's the middle ground? Some companies are trying to push, you can see in the US and Israel, trying to push for everyone to come back for almost all the time. They're getting resistant from that. So that's one question that's out there. I personally believe things are never going to go back to the way they were, but will be in a good middle ground. And I think each company has to decide what's their DNA. Some companies are going to we just are okay with people working remotely 100%. Some companies are going to push to mostly come to the office. But that middle ground, I think, is going to be the hardest to navigate. So that's one question. The second question is the money. It seems to be flowing on the streets. How long can this last? I studied economics in undergrad. I wasn't very good at it, but I do remember the cyclicality of the economy, right? And so now we're on a high. I don't know how to say it, but probably there's going to be a low at some point. Anybody's guess, interest rates are low. So we'll see what happens. It doesn't seem to be anything in the very near future, but who knows? So those are the two main questions. But at the same time, for us as sort of early stage investors, we are still laser focused on those founders that really are trying to solve a major problem. Yes, there's all these distractions that are happening, but they're laser focused on the problem they're super passionate about. They really want to focus on, and they want to dedicate the next few years plus of their lives on it. And that's what inspires us to do what we do, right? We get our energy from them, right? That's really been the great joy of this business.
And so really, what's your kick out of all of this? So what you wake up every day, you've mentioned you're moving back and forth, 3 months to California, 3 months, but it's crazy. It's a crazy life that you're leading. You're working with more than 80 companies. Every day you're seeing new companies. You're looking at new verticals. It's very tiring, I'm sure. It's very confusing, but what's really the joy that you're getting out of working with UpWest or in venture capital in general?
Yeah. Look, first of all, UpWest is a startup on its own, right? So 10 years ago, we started UpWest. We grew it a little bit. We're growing it a little bit now, but we're still remaining, I think, small and nimble. And as a startup, we have a set of customers, our founders that we work with. And what we get the greatest joy is helping them work through their own vision and their own set of beliefs. Personally, I get great joy of working with various domains and various founders, and being there for them. They're the heroes in this crazy, mini world we live in sort of the high tech. And, 2 weeks ago was a great reminder of that through sort of important milestones for the company. But, sometimes it doesn't end that way. Sometimes, it goes to an M&A or sometimes the company doesn't work out. It's being there not just for the highs, that's easy. It's being there for the lows. And I think that's where we, try to work with the founders to see what makes the most sense. But the highs, the lows, anything. It's just for us, just working with the people and the founders that makes the most difference for us.
And I guess that no day is the same.
I'm sorry?
I guess that no day is the same.
Not at all. Not at all. But it's great. I mean, my other investors that I know, they feel the same thing. It's that excitement that we see that really is tremendous in the work that we do.
I want to take you back to your childhood. Now, I have a few last questions that I ask everybody. Now, I didn't prepare you in advance, so I'm warning you already. Take me back to your childhood, middle school. What really fascinates you as a kid? You walk life, you walk through the streets. What really occupies you, as a kid?
What really occupied me as a kid? Few things. On a super personal life, I love sports. So, that's one. Second, my, Commodore 64 with tape, I think, occupied me for a while. I was dumbfounded when the floppy disk came. I was like, what a miracle. But then, after that, it's, everybody reads books, and the books I gravitate toward, I don't know, it was all about autobiographies,
really?
About the world's greatest companies, whether it's from the McDonald's of the world to the Apple story of the 80s, 90s. Those were tremendous. And I think it got me thinking a lot about what it takes to build these global brands and global companies. I've never lived in the States before going there 20 plus years ago. That's a long time ago. But that's why I made the move. I thought that being there in that ecosystem, probably in my lifetime, possibly will be the best place to try to build those companies at. And so that's what got me going initially to go to business school there and try to help sort of Israelis that try to follow suit and build their companies that way.
Both as a kid and as an economic undergraduate, did you think that you're going to be working in the intersection of finance and innovation? Was this always sort of the convergence of Gil?
Absolutely not. So when I came to the US, I always thought I would be in corporate. I would love it. And it worked well for several years. I joined Yahoo corporate development and grew in the organization. But just being in the Valley and seeing lots of Israeli founders come through the Valley and seeing their struggles and the challenges they faced, from 2005 to 2010 and onwards. I think once you hear the same story again and again, it, I think, inspired Shuli and I to sort of kickstart UpWest and do that. And I think once we got the taste of the startup that is UpWest, we never look back. That this is sort of our startup, but and in a way our mission. But that's what sort of got me sidetracked from this very good corporate life. I sometimes ask myself I could have had. I think, and I'm like, wow, that would have been fun being in some company. But here we are at the super early stage of startups, and obviously I have zero regrets and only very grateful that I stumbled upon it many years ago.
And I've already answered the second question about what inspires you today. And you mentioned the work with the founders, the customers of UpWest, and how you're thinking through partnering with them in the long run. But the last question, the trickiest one, 3 words, 2, 4, 5, however many you choose, that you would use to describe yourself. Or if I would ask Shuli, who is Gil?
Yeah. So first of all, hopefully being an advisor, so advisory role to the startup is something that I aspire to do. Second, I try to be trustworthy and I work in it and really so founders feel they can be super open with me and with us. And third, it's not one word, it's sort of 2, but it's hyphenated, which is Kfar Saba, which is the city I grew up in, and my parents, my family, many cousins all live there. So those are probably sort of the 3 words I would use to describe myself.
Gil, toda rabba. Thank you very
so
much. Thank you, UpWest. Thank
you.